I'll start with what I think is probably the broadest, and it has always been a trend, and it will continue to be a trend. You heard it here, which is the number one issue that the C-suite is focused on and has been for the decades that we've been doing research with the C-suite. And this definitely impacts CHROs and their organizations is attracting and retaining talent. So it's it's basic, it's table stakes, but if you think about it, that really is needs to be the focus of HR organizations and the HR leaders that lead those organizations because they're going to be called upon to help figure that out. And there's some dynamics right now that are making this probably even more challenging right now and into 2025, and some trends that we've been seeing. So, for example, uh, it has been a historically low unemployment rate. The labor markets, although they've eased a bit, they continue to be tight, very tight. And depending on what economic news you choose to listen to, it seems like the economy is definitely going to continue to be strong, which means that unemployment will remain low probably, and the job market will continue, the jobs will continue to grow. And so it's a supply demand thing. Will we have enough bodies to fill the jobs? So that's one thing. The other thing that we all are very painfully aware of is that AI has become a factor for all of us. And it is something that is changing the dynamic of how we think about work, how we think about the kinds of skills we need, about how work gets done. And HR organizations, but in particular, HR leaders have an opportunity to step up and really lead their organizations through how do I tackle that? How do organizations really navigate that massive sea change in terms of how work is getting done and what that is going to mean for the type of talent you need today versus the future? Organizations are going to be looking to their CHROs and their HR executives to help them figure that out. So as AI, and we all know ChatGPT just celebrated their 2-year anniversary. I mean, it's astonishing to think about how the use of that platform alone, sort of really generative AI, how that has changed so much of what we can do, the promise of what we'll be able to do, and how we can make jobs even more interesting. But somebody needs to guide that. So I think attracting and retaining talent is always going to be something very important. But the advent of how we navigate the types of jobs, the types of skills, and the tight labor market is going to make that even more challenging in the future. I think leaders and organizations need to recognize that their workforce, the well-being of their workforce is under strain. It's stressed right now. Workers are stressed, and when workers are stressed, you don't have the best productivity, you can't create the best culture, you can't serve your clients as well. So understanding and helping leaders navigate that right now, I think is very important. And CHROs increasingly are being called upon by their leaders, by CEOs, but also by their boards to provide some perspective on that and how that's going to potentially impact their organizations going forward. So it is, yes, about, how does AI impact, but it's also about the well-being of the workforce and the stresses, and how do you create an environment where you can anticipate what might happen, especially given some of the election outcomes. And if policies change, what impact is that going to have on your organization? And how do you prepare for that and mitigate the risks associated with that? So that all will impact your ability to attract and retain the right kind of talent that you need going forward. CHROs talk about a lot. Our members, they get together and they say, how do we draw a clear line between anything that we do programmatically, and how can we also be honest with ourselves about how those programs are impacting or moving the needle around retention, attraction, employment brand, and then productivity, which is like the leap that many of us have trouble doing. You can definitely see correlations, and I think that's a good start to the measurement conundrum that we have. But getting that direct line to actual causation, I think we have to find new and different ways to triangulate data in a way that says, well, we don't have exact perfect control. However, we can see that these actions resulted in, improvements in X, Y, and Z. Sometimes there is things like employee sentiment, or it's, the retention of your top employees. I think it's important to really be able to understand your employee base, to have a good handle on, who are our best employees, how are we evaluating that? So the whole performance management, performance evaluation, you need to have data there. You have to be able to triangulate that with turnover data and triangulate that with perhaps engagement data that allows you to then look at who are, our best leaders in the organization. Is there a correlation between if the sentiment is good and the turnover is low and some of your top performers are really outperforming and they have this leader, is there a correlation there that we can actually say, yeah, that's probably legitimate? Those are the kinds of ways that I think HR leaders need to be really creative about how they think about that data. I've had conversations where we've talked about how would you create a culture index for your organization, and what would that include? And what kind of buckets of data would you need to be looking at? Some of it would be internal data, like development rates and employee engagement rates, how you're moving people through the organization, what your turnover is like, and perhaps trying to correlate that with actual, you know, business results. You'd have to look at external data and external sentiment about your organization. What does your employment brand look like? But then I think you also have to really think about, how do you tie that back then to actual business results? And that's the difficult part. I think the role will continue to evolve as being a key strategist and key advisor to both parts of the organization, the CEO as well as the board. Um, and it's going to be not just because of the need to attract and retain and build a good brand. I think it's also the role of the CHRO to help mitigate some of the risks. The navigating some of the risks involved will continue to get more complicated. It's not just about regulation. I think it's about how external factors like the economy, but also like social movements, social impacts, things like that will continue to create challenges in the workplace. And CHROs are going to be the ones that are tapped to kind of help the organizations figure all that out.